You wrote somewhere in Life on a Young Planet that from our current vantage point, we tend to think of life as being a process of generation and replacement of species. So, in my own words, one day the polar bears are gone, and then the next, some new sort of finch is discovered on an isolated island. But on a larger scale, evolution is constantly spreading out and bringing with it new forms and ways of living. Could you expand a bit on this idea if I've captured it correctly? Because it does diverge from our intuitive picture of how evolution works.
Yeah, no, sure. I'm happy to. And I think I wrote that in response to what I sometimes call the generation of Abraham approach to the history of life, that first there were bacteria, then there were protozoa, then there were animals, then there were mammals, then there were us. And in fact, there's probably just as many bacteria now as there were 4 billion years ago, probably more. And so on the broadest scale, uh, diversity is additive. You start out with all bacteria and archaea, then you add single-celled eukaryotes to those, but you don't get rid of the bacteria. The single-celled eukaryotes can't complete the carbon cycle and sulfur cycle without them, still can't. Then you add multicellular forms, some photosynthetic, some heterotrophic to those. And yes, on a smaller time scale, species come and go. That's still the case. But I think it is useful to step back and if you look on the broad scale of our planet's entire history, we see that there is this important component of, just increasing diversity of type, not just
Mhm.
species.
I I guess this might not necessarily count as diversity of type, but diversity of species at least is I read or heard at some point that they've discovered bacteria that live exclusively on the side of highways where they consume rubber from ruptured tires. And given that this wide lens that takes microscopic organisms into account as well as the macroscopic species. I mean, take COVID and its variants, for instance. It certainly does seem like they're constantly, like with the snap of a finger, spreading it out and adapting into various forms. And on longer and longer time scales, these branch out into diverse morphological types as well.
Yeah, I mean, you touch on an important point, and that is products of the human presence on Earth have created new environments that microbes have exploited, and there is now very active experimental effort to try and exploit those bacterial capacities for the benefit of humans. So, for example, there are any number of labs that are trying to find out whether we can use bacteria to break down plastics in the ocean, for example, bacteria to clean up oil spills. So, in a sense, yes, it is, I think, fitting and proper to just see what remarkable evolutionary capacities bacteria have. And it is also, I think, reasonable to think that it's worth understanding those because they, at least some of them, could be put to service for the betterment of the human condition.